My name is Hunter Holtzapfel, host of Beyond the Reservoir, and I'm excited to share with you the people and technology that make up the Reservoir performance team and beyond here at SLB. My hope is that you leave this episode having learned more about the guest and what they do in the energy industry and their careers along the way. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Massiel Diez, Production Systems Integration Project Lead in Mexico and former RPer. Massiel, great to have you on the show, and thank you for joining.
Hey, Hunter. Thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast. I cannot wait to be part of RP for just the next 30 minutes and discuss a little bit more about my career at SLB.
Yeah, great. I'm glad to have you on and to have such a prominent guest on, I'd say, to show about your career and also just what helps drive you and motivate you. So I think it's going to be a great episode. We prepared and planned a little bit ahead of time, and I think it's going to be a great show for the listener. So starting off, maybe we can just share a little bit more about you, where you're from, what kind of got you into SLB and the energy industry overall, and kind of your background.
Yes, Hunter. So I am originally from Colombia, small island in the Caribbean called San Andres, but I grew up in Montreal, Canada. Mm-hmm. So basically, I'm Canadian. At the end of the day, it's where I grew up. It's how I lived my everyday life from childhood to adulthood. I went to McGill University in Montreal and I studied chemical engineering. Mm-hmm. I had no idea about the oil and gas industry. None of my family members, no one didn't even know that was an opportunity for a female, to be honest. And luckily, Schlumberger at the time was at the career fair and they had this big line that I was like, who's this company that I've never heard of? And why do people even want to go work there? And so I saw a girl, Schlumberger was really smart with their marketing, even back then. And they had this big poster of a girl wearing blue coveralls. She had stilettos on one foot and steel toes on the other. She had her hair and makeup done and she had dirty coveralls. Mm-hmm. And when I looked at the poster, I thought, that's me. That's so cool. And I'm a little bit of that. I'm a tomboy, but I also like to get dressed up once in a while. I'm studying engineering. I would love to work in the field. And so representation really did matter back then. It still does today. And that's really what got me into SLB.
Yeah, it's interesting because I believe the same poster or kind of material was used when I started. There's also this video, I don't know if you remember, where I want to say it was a female who was like going to all these different locations and talking about the career and like how many exciting opportunities it could have for you. And it really like was a different opportunity than most of the other engineering companies that were, at least when I was, recruiting as an engineer as well. So it's interesting to see how it's like a lot of the similarities, but like different things call out for different people. For me, it was like, get your hands dirty, the adventure. For you, it was the poster of the female with the kind of 1 foot in the field and 1 foot still in the, stilettos, like you said. So that's very cool. And then, so you joined, which was when, 2012, 2013?
So I actually was very lucky and I got an internship. It was 3 out of like thousands of people in Canada, out of all the universities to pick 3 interns. And I was lucky enough to be one of them. And so for the summer, I spent my time as a frac engineer up north in Grand Prairie and Fort St. John in British Columbia. And I got to experience what life would be like in the field before actually accepting an offer, which I think is really cool. And not a lot of people get that opportunity. And so when they made me an offer, it was for wireline. At the end of my internship, I had a job before I even graduated. And I was like, whatever I do, I need to come back to Schlumberger because I just had such a good summer. I loved the people and I loved being outdoors and I was like, I could do this. And so when they offered wireline, I was like, what is wireline? I was so confused. I've never heard of it. And I remember Googling and like even YouTubing it. And this was 2012, right? End of 2012. There was nothing online about what wireline was. It was just like a round cable, like the diameter of the cable electrically showing up. And I was like, okay, this is weird, but I will just give it a try. And so I signed my letter not knowing what wireline was. And
then you learned. Yeah. I mean, I assume you went through the same like 3-month intensive that I did. And like you learn what wireline is very quickly. I have a question that we didn't really talk about ahead of time, but it came up through your talking. Wireline and the field is pretty challenging. Do you think that experience shapes you and then is what helps you now later on in your career? Or do you think it's kind of who you are going into it, and because of who you are, you're, successful or able to finish or complete it? Do you know, or have a feeling like, was it the field experience that shaped you, or were you that kind of person that then excelled at the field life and then like it really honed your drive coming out of it?
A really great question. I think it could go both ways depending on the person. For me personally, I went through life with a lot of challenges. Growing up, immigrant, family, single mom, hard work was like
Mm-hmm.
all I knew,
Yeah.
So I had multiple jobs in the summer, 2 or 3, where I would start at 6 in the morning and I would finish at midnight when other kids were just having a good summer. I was working a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And for some weird reason, I never complained about it. I just loved working and being just a go workaholic at like 16 years old and like seeing the
Yeah.
money in my bank account and being able to provide for my family and help out. And so when I first joined the field, I was like, this is no different than like my life, right? And I just had finished 3.5 years of university engineering, which is so hard and dedicated and just like hustling, going to bed late, waking up early. And so when I got to Schlumberger and I remember being in the field and people complaining about it, I was like, I'm getting paid to do this?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Like, I've never made this kind of money in my life or even dreamed of. And so for me, I was very grateful for the opportunity. And I think, of course, the field shapes you even more into who you are. And I think it's definitely helped with self-discipline and working hard and, timelines, responsibility, like a lot of things that maybe I didn't have in my childhood. It definitely
Mm-hmm.
taught me more, but I would say going into it, I was already a very hard worker and like I was going to be able to do it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting though. It's because what makes us successful at being a field engineer and getting through, because not it's tough. It's it's
It
no
is very hard.
it's not don't want to sugarcoat it and say it's all rosy and easy. It's tough. A lot of people can't necessarily make it. So what helps that kind of person? Is it some innate ability? I think probably some of it is, and then some of it's just getting out there and experiencing it. And some people that you would never expect to survive in the field end up surviving and going on to great things. So it's a
I'm
very interesting.
sure I'm sure when I was first hired and showed up to the shop, a lot of people were like, this girl's not going to make it through the summer.
Yeah.
Or there's no way this girl's going to make it, just from like my external appearance, especially I'm
Mm-hmm.
short, I'm small, I'm fragile, all of these things. But I did really well in the field. And I think it's because I loved it. I was used to challenges and I also had no option but to make this work, because
Yeah,
this
yeah,
for me was the financial way to get out of my background. So I had no option. I didn't have mom and dad to go cry to and like have a full house paid for and like all of this wealth, like, oh, mom and dad have this bank account that we set up when you were 3 years old. I didn't have that. So for
yeah,
me it was like, I'm gonna make this work because I have to. Like, I don't have a choice. So it
yeah.
it helped, I think.
It's interesting because I've had some other guests on that talk about their time in the field, and their reason for going into energy industry or the field is it's always different. But it's and at least myself, I don't never thought about like what helped me be a successful field engineer or in this company in general. And I think everyone's backgrounds are different. So if someone says, "What's the single most important thing?" It's like I don't think there is a single most important thing other than maybe hard work and perseverance. And speaking of perseverance, this industry we're in, oil and gas, is very cyclical, up and down, highs and lows. Even when times are high and everything's going good, there can be some lows. Can you talk about how you've gotten through those challenges, whether it's in the field on a day to day, been out in the field for 24 plus hours, or dealing with a downturn? How have you gone through that? Is it leaning on your background, leaning on your family or your mom for support, your husband? How have you navigated that, you know, those ups and downs of the industry?
Yeah, it's definitely a roller coaster. And for me, my first downturn was 2015, 16. So
Mm-hmm.
the first wave in Canada was in 15, and all of my coworkers were getting laid off and just packaged in and out. And I was already in the company, like 3-ish years. I was still not a grade 11. I think I was a grade 10. And it was hard because all of my friends and colleagues were getting laid off. And so I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I made the cut. Okay. So I continued working, and it was really a hard year because there's less people and you're working for everybody else around you. And it's a tough time in the industry as a whole, right? Money's
Yeah.
tight, etc. But then 2016 hit, and all the people who had gone LOAs or who had gone laid off, they started bringing back some LOAs. And then all of a sudden, the people who kind of stayed through 2015 and did all the hard work, we got laid off. And because Canada, unfortunately, they thought there was going to be another upcycle or things were going to get better, but Canada got worse and worse. And they had already closed down a lot of shops, and Nisku was it's still the last one, I think, alive.
Yeah.
And so, I get this package all of a sudden that I'm getting laid off. And I remember for me, it was the end of the world that day.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever cried this much in my life in terms of just what one day you're here and the next you're out. Like it's very hard, especially because you see it around you and other people and you don't think it's ever going to be you, and it's you one day. And so it was a very hard experience for me, but I am so grateful that happened to me so early on in my career, because it changed my mindset. It changed to be prepared and to just, you never know. So it's really important to know that it can happen and not just, think that you're going to be here for 30 years without this, because it's so cyclical. And so, during that time, of course, I didn't want to stay without a job. I needed to work. And so I got a job at a brewery in Edmonton called Budweiser. I'm sure all of you know that. Drinking lots of beer. And it was a really good opportunity. But the second Schlumberger called me, which was like 8 months later, because things were getting better and they wanted me to come back. But this time it was to Midland. So they were like, we'll transfer you to Midland, field engineer, finish your grade 11. I took it right away because I still really loved the company. I loved the field. I loved the managers that I had in the past. And I remember when I got laid off, they all said, wait for a phone call. This is not goodbye. This is just what happens to a lot of us. And a lot of people come back even after the pandemic and things like that. And so I was lucky enough to come back to Schlumberger.
Yeah, that's where we met in Midland, right around the same time. I had come back from a LOA actually. And met in Midland. But you've mentioned so many things that, one of them being, it was like you said, one of the most devastating days in your career. But clearly you've come back stronger, better. I think there's a song, "What Doesn't Kill You Make You Stronger." I'm not going to sing it.
Yes,
but
it's true.
You mentioned we all have to be prepared for something, whether it's a move we didn't expect or a layoff or reduction. I mean, I think there's some things that you can take away from those. One, it's not you. It's just a situation. It's don't take it personally, even though I'm sure it's very hard. I mean, I had a similar thing with the leave of absence. It's like, well, what? Am I not good enough anymore? I worked through the first wave of cuts. And so there's a lot of emotion, but it's clear you were able to, dust off and get back up and come back and have an excellent career. Are there any key things that you can tell, the listener? Because, hopefully they don't have to get that exact experience, but I'm sure some challenge is going to come their way. As part of life, part of a career. Is there any advice you can give them other than just, keep going, keep working?
Yes. A lot of advice, actually. And it's very important that everybody does this. So when COVID hit and the pandemic was, in the kind of just getting through, a lot of layoffs happening again in the oil and gas industry. I mean, I've never seen this many layoffs, especially in North America. And I remember I was still here. Luckily, I didn't get cut, but I saw a lot of coworkers who had been in the company 15, 20 years, and SLB is all they ever knew. They've never done a resume since they graduated 15, 20 years ago. So they had no idea how to be marketable to the industry, or they also didn't think that their skill set in oil and gas was transferable to Amazon and Microsoft and Google and maybe just Budweiser, other companies, other industries. And so they felt like their identity was just Schlumberger and like, what do I do now? And and they're a lot older too. And so it's harder to remarket yourself. You're not this new fresh grad. And so I would say A is make sure you are networking with people outside of the company. Too many times you look at who your top network is and it's all your friends and family from the company. And then a downturn comes and they're no longer there. So you really need a support system that's external to the industry so that you know people in other companies, you've got friends around, and also not just oil and gas, but that you know people in other parts of the industry so that if anything happens, you've got people to pick up a phone call and, get help or, try to get an interview somewhere. I think when the pandemic hit, I realized how many people had no network and they didn't know how to do a resume, or they weren't sure that their skills were transferable, but they really are. It's just how you place it and say, don't focus it so much on wireline, because a lot of people are like, I don't know what wireline is, so you can't come work here. But it's more of like, I've managed projects, I've managed people, I've done,
Yeah.
responsible for $1 million worth of work. And so it's how you place it that I think you could be marketable to other companies when
Yeah,
something
that's
like
big. That's definitely big, and kind of know your value, know your worth, be able to communicate it too. That's a big thing is just communication. A lot of us, especially engineers, have a hard time communicating. So it's a good thing to work on, and you can do that through networking. Yeah, great advice. A ton. We could spend like a whole hour on just that probably. Um, Along the same lines, you mentioned grateful to make it through the cuts. I think a lot of us felt that way, or those who left the company for whatever reason, found a new company, maybe now feel grateful and like they owe the company something, and maybe they feel stuck in a position. Um, do you have any advice to someone who feels stuck and like they can't move for whatever reason? How to, one, not just panic and abort mission, because that's definitely not the right answer, and then how to maybe look for their next career step, but what can you tell someone to navigate that kind of feeling of, oh, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do? I imagine it's much the same.
Yeah. So I think we got to look at our career as a very long journey. And when you do feel stuck, don't just give up and say it's over. I'm not moving. I've been in this role for X amount of years. They're not seeing my value, because your career really is long. And sometimes you just have to get over the little bumps. I think we've all had ups and downs in our careers, and this is part of it. So first, I think is communication is key. And a lot of us are not good at that. And so a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times we think, I've been wanting to move from this role, or I'm unhappy, or I want to do X. I want to be a DGM. I want to be, you have all these ambitions that maybe nobody knows about, and you get frustrated against your managers and the company, but you actually haven't communicated that very well. And so sometimes we live in our head thinking they don't see what I want. But have you had the COR? Have you sat down with your manager, with HR, to discuss your next moves? Have you updated your career portal? Because they actually look into that, and they really want
Yeah.
to see that you updated it. Have you updated your CNP? All of these things that maybe we don't think are that important, but when it comes to talent management and HR and the next moves, it's actually quite important. I think another thing is we assume that they know what we want,
Yeah,
and
it's a big
we're
one.
like, but it's not. So sometimes it's, even if you have to iterate it, even if you have to mention it multiple times, it's better than being more quiet and just assume that they know what you want. Because I think once a company is clear with what is next for you and what you want, and if there's a business opportunity and you've got the right talents, and I think it'll work out. SLB is usually pretty good at making sure that they put people in the right place.
I think that's a common misconception too, is like, oh, if I'm super generic and if I say I want to do everything, it'll be easier to place me. But no, if you're specific, maybe not like, hey, I want this job in this place at this time. That's maybe too specific. But if you're like, I want this type of job, they can look for those openings. I think it helps to project out what you want to a degree. So that's great advice. I think it would definitely help any listener, whether they're in SLB or any other company. I mean, communicate with your manager, communicate with your HR, let people know this is, these are my career aspirations, and I'm sure it will work out. And that doesn't mean it's going to work out today, tomorrow, or the next day. I mean, it might take some time. And sometimes, to get to this end goal, you might have to take maybe not a step back, but a step sideways, or doing something you might not love, but it's honing something to help your career.
I have a good piece of advice that a lot of people don't do, but Modar Khan, who was my boss years
mm-hmm.
ago, I saw him do it, and he taught me that was start doing the job that you want without getting the role.
Yeah.
So if you just start doing or show interest in something that maybe isn't even a role, maybe that job doesn't even exist, and you're just constantly doing really well at your job, but you're excelling in this other area that you want to focus on. I think if you do well enough, the company will be like, they've got a point. Like, they're doing this so well, and maybe this could be a business opportunity. And usually he's created a lot of his jobs And I feel like maybe I've done that a little bit as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's, I mean, as you know, how I got this job as well in marketing communications. I mean, I was doing the marketing. So yeah, great advice. Huge thing to bring up. And I think, he's 100% right there. And yeah, advocate for yourself. I think that's a big one as well. You mentioned in the last piece of advice, to market yourself, project what you do. And one way of doing that is social media. And you're no stranger to social media. I would say you're probably an expert by many metrics. How important would you say social media is in the average employee's career and life? And then as a quick follow up to that, how do you prevent that from taking over your life? Because it is almost designed to suck us in. So yeah, 2-part loaded question there.
Love both questions. So listen, I started social media about 8 or 9 years ago, before it was cool, before it was accepted, before people were used to it. And, when I was in the field, I was putting out content of, videos of what it's like to be a field engineer, what it's like to live in West Texas, advice to women who want to join. I was just doing content that I would have liked to have when I joined, because as I told you, I YouTube and Googled it, and there was absolutely nothing about wireline.
Yeah.
So I felt like, well, now I am a wireline engineer. I want to show and share, what I do. And I think millennials, or at least, my generation, we want to share stuff. Any tips that I have, I'm like, hey, Hunter, I've got this, you should try this workout, or we've got to try this. We're sharing kind of, generation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I started to do. Of course, back then, nobody was doing that. Nobody was talking about what it's like to be a field engineer, etc. And so, of course, the company didn't know what to do with this kind of content. And so they would just try to shut it down. I kept doing it and just started removing Schlumberger name because I felt like I still had to stay true to myself, which is something I really wanted to do, because I felt like I owed it to other women that they could have a career in oil and gas, and that they could also provide for themselves, and like look at all the opportunities I've been able to have, and look at my career as a female, and you can too. And so I didn't stop. I continued because I knew at the end of the day what I was doing was the right thing. It's just sometimes I'm ahead of time. You might be a visionary, you might be years in advance, and you're going to get into trouble, you're going to get into challenges and obstacles because people don't believe in you. But I just kept going through it. And, especially after COVID, social media just, rocketed. And now I think people realize the importance of social media, because it's how everybody consumes news, content, anything is on your phone or on your laptop, and you're on LinkedIn all day, you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook, you're on YouTube. Unfortunately, it's not the best thing to be on all of these apps all day long, because to your point, it will consume you. But if you know how to use it well and you want to market yourself properly, it's a really good tool to create a really good network for when you need it.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's you mentioned, after or during COVID, really the social media exploded. I mean, you can see our company; it's even has accepted it a lot more, and I mean, companies
Instagram,
in general,
which is so cool.
I know, right?
I never thought I would see Schlumberger on Instagram, so I'm very proud and happy to see that.
Yeah, it's great, and yeah, certainly have those safeguards in place. And I mean, the safeguards I have in place might not work for you, and what you have might not work for me. I think it's a very individual thing, but definitely important to have on there because you don't want it to like overtake your career, or spend more time on social media than actual work. So
I'll give
certainly
you some of my tips on how I stay away from it. It's worked really well, and I very much think everybody should be doing this. So if you actually go on your settings on your iPhone, I don't know about the rest of the phones, but you go to screen time. I block all of the social media apps. So Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, anything that TikTok, which is, it's addicting, right? I block them from certain hours in the day. So the second I wake up, I can't go on them. So from 6 a.m. to noon, they're blocked, which means I don't have time to waste in the morning. So get all of my big deliverables and things that I need to do in the day and prepare myself well. Because I would notice that when I would wake up, the first thing I would do is just scroll.
Yeah.
Every second you get, you're scrolling. And so I was really good at realizing like, I'm wasting a little bit too much time on this. I need to take ownership back of my time, especially with how much I have going on. Efficiency is how I can manage all of my things. And so the screen time is really important. Another thing that I do is I limit only an hour and a half in total, after that block comes alive at noon till, I go to bedtime, I can't be on Instagram or any of these apps more than an hour and a half because my iPhone will just block me. And so ever since I did that, it was really useful. And I think with social media, I'm a content creator. And so I do need some time and I want to see what's out there so that I could, and you got to stay up to date with the trends. But at the end of the day, I'm a social media content creator. I'm not a consumer. And I really need to stay focused on that, because when you become a consumer, it's really easy to spiral and waste your time scrolling
and compare
nonstop.
and get lost in that.
Yeah, it's not healthy. It's not good.
Yeah. I've certainly seen myself, as you know, won't bore the listener with, but various creation phases of my life, and when it goes back into consumer mode, I mean, it's so easy. That person has this person has that. Oh, this is the latest product, and then the next thing you know, you're buying like stuff you don't need. So yeah, it's good. I like those safeguards. Certainly, definitely is. Switching gears a little bit from the social media, but tremendous advice. And I think it's, definite tool, especially in these times. But now looking at kind of, you do a lot. It's fitness, mom, wife, career. I mean, maybe the order differs, but there's a ton of stuff going on for you. How do you stay motivated? What keeps you motivated and keeps you firing on all cylinders to do all these things, not just mediocrely, but successfully?
I think I just have really high standards for myself, and I don't want to let myself down. And so I want to make sure that I'm productive in all of the areas. I always tell people balance looks very different on everybody. I don't recommend it, but it's really what fuels me. I love being busy. I love that. I have checklists that are like 50 items long. And I'm like, yes. Like people stress out over that. I love that. I'm like, this. And I like to feel like I'm being productive. So if I can't, maybe this is not a good thing, but I can't sit still and just like, I'm going to watch some Netflix, or I'm going to just like, I'm going to go sit outside and enjoy the sun. I probably should, but I don't. I'm like, I will go for a walk so I could burn calories while I'm walking. And I might as well listen to a podcast about learning about self-discipline. And it's like, I want to fill myself with so much. Probably not good. Don't take my advice, but it's really what makes me happy, and it's how I work really well. I would say my motivators have maybe always been the same. One, I really want to make my mom proud. She immigrated to Canada, and it's been a huge driver for me since a young age of I want to make my family proud. Second, I'm a mom now, and I want my daughter to have the best role model and look at me and say, I want to be just like mom. And that's really why I do a lot of what I do. And third is because of my social media following, I feel like people are looking at me again as a role model in a way where they're, wanting to do more of what I do, of like, I get a lot of messages with like, hey, I started working out because of you, or I started running because of you, or I'm doing morning walks, or I'm going to level up in my career. I'm going to ask for a promotion, or so it's really nice to see that all the items and the actions that I do every day, people are watching and they're being inspired by it. And I never saw it that way. I never saw myself as like a social media person where people get inspired by. But when I get these messages, I'm like, I got to keep doing this because people are actually getting better because of what I'm doing. And so it really makes me accountable for my actions.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think all of us, maybe not to the same degree, but can look at, I'm a role model to someone, whether it's, like myself to my daughter or son or friends, family, whoever it is. I think we can all.
You're a manager. People are
exactly.
looking up to you. They want to see you in your best version. And
I think it's a good way to keep motivated. And like you said, you have some intrinsic things that you're trying to like keep your mom proud. And then also the fact that you just like to be productive. I have probably not to the same degree, but this is similar. My wife always says, Hunter, you say you want to relax on the weekend, but then after like 15 minutes, you're up going running around. Like same thing. I'm walking to get my steps, but listening to a podcast at the same time. However, I will say I started listening to music occasionally now just to like chill, and it's actually quite nice. So I recommend that. So we hit on motivators, and I think you mentioned in there role model. You're definitely a role model to many females. I mean, I've seen some of the posts on people reaching out. What would you tell a young female or male, for that matter, who's looking to get into STEM or oil and gas or the energy industry, but doesn't have any family background, doesn't have any ties to it, but they think it's interesting or saw a post by someone and say, I think I want to do that. What advice would you give to them?
I would say coming to the energy industry is truly where the future is going to happen because of the energy transition, because we power the world. And even though we would like to see oil and gas disappear, it's just not going to happen for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think oil and gas is bad for the environment, or you would like to change it, which the younger generation clearly cares about their planet, maybe a lot more than the other generations, this is the place to be. And how you can help is by going to a STEM degree, becoming an engineer, a scientist, a physicist, etc. Because we need this young talent to come with new ideas and challenge what we've done for the past 100 years. And so, every time I get that question of should I go into a STEM degree or should I even go into the energy industry because it's going to end very soon, I tell them it's quite the contrary. This is where you have a huge opportunity to change the world, actually.
Yeah,
And
for
for
sure.
females specifically, like I was telling you before we started recording, it's a great time to be a woman in almost all industries because we are such a small percentage, and companies now with ESG and they're just more diverse and inclusion, focused. They're going to want to increase their numbers. Like Schlumberger wants to include, SLB wants to increase their numbers. And so if you're a female, you're a high performer and you're hungry and you want to be successful, you've got a lot of doors opened that maybe you didn't have open years ago. So I would
Yeah.
definitely recommend it.
Yeah, that's big. It's I like how you say it's really on the leading edge, and if you want change, you have to be part of it and be willing to jump in. I like that, and I was thinking about that this weekend when it was rather hot down here in Houston, or I guess up where I'm north of you, and just like I'm in the perfect place to be helping to make this change, and hopefully cooler summers ahead. So yeah, I like that. Um, Speaking of women, and you just mentioned it a little bit, it's clear you advocate for women in the industry, women in industry. What inspires you so much to do that? And another two-part question: how do you suggest we increase women in STEM, whether it's people currently in college or people like our daughters who are, 2 years old. What do you see as the number one thing that people like me, our colleagues, can do right away to increase the numbers? And then also, part one, what inspires you to do that and advocate so much for women?
So I'll start with the second part with our daughters is it starts very young. Everything you tell them will matter and will impact them as they grow up. And I think that's something my mom did really well. And I think it helped that she was a single mom. So I didn't really see a male in my life kind of, be the breadwinner. I didn't have a male telling me things to do, or like my mom was everything. So I saw her
Mm-hmm.
as super strong and like, I want to be just like her. So I think it definitely helps when you have that kind of background. But for my daughter is, being super positive when you talk to her of like, you're smart, you're confident, you're good at math, you're good at science, you're going to be an engineer, you're going to be a doctor. Those are things that I guess women didn't really get back then. It was like, you're going to be a good wife, you're going to be a good mom, and like those aren't bad things, but it definitely, you know, women lacked confidence later on. And I think it stemmed from young being a kid. The other thing too, and I've posted about this on my Instagram, is toys that are, aimed for little girls to me just bother me so much. And so my daughter doesn't get any of those toys. I give her Legos and I give her things that maybe guys get, like trucks and like other things where she can be more creative, Play-Doh, etc. All the things that I would see for little girls was like makeup and cooking. Like it's cool to cook, but I don't want her to think that like she belongs in a kitchen. And maybe I'm
Yeah.
taking things too crazy, but I'm just like, no, she's gonna have the same stuff as the guys. And so I think little things like that are underlying that we don't even notice. So we're preparing women that they can't do all of these careers is
Mm-hmm.
important. I saw it was like a survey where they said, okay, draw a fireman or draw a doctor, draw an engineer, and these were all like kids that were 5 and 6 years old, female and male, and they all drew men. Like,
Yeah.
and then it's like, but there's a lot of women representation within all these things, but little kids literally just drew guys. And so that really opened up my eyes to everything that I do with my daughter will have an impact, and I want to set her up for success. And so it starts at home. Second is, as a professional, like anybody listening to this, you have to give back. Go talk at your kids' school. They have STEM days. And if they don't, go create a STEM day. Go talk to the teacher. Say, I want to talk about being an engineer, especially if you're a female and you can go represent, because little girls will look up to that, is really important. So it's giving back to the community and like the career that you have and showcasing it to kids that maybe don't think that they can be that.
Mm-hmm.
And for the other last part was, why do I try to do this? I feel like I just owe it to women that they can do this. And if it takes me to share my life and share my journey to inspire them, then I'll do it. Because if I can change one person's life and be like, I could be an engineer, I could be a field engineer, I could have a career in oil and gas, and I could be financially, better off, and I don't have to depend on, a husband, and I could be a mom, and I could be all of these things, then I will do it just so that I can maybe help one person out.
Yeah, no, and I know you've helped. I'm sure you've helped more than just one. So no, keep it up. It's awesome to see, and I love the advice on how to increase, women in STEM, women in industry, and actually just people in science and engineering in general. I think early exposure. In fact, my wife orders our daughter a little kit that comes in the mail, and it's little science experiments that she can do each month. So it's pretty cool. It's cool to see that that's more and more kind of accepted, and maybe we can thank social media in part to that as well. So changing gears 100% here. Now looking at back to SLB, what is something that excites you the most about the new SLB? It's we changed from Schlumberger to SLB about a year ago now, coming up on the year, I think next month. What excites you most about that change? And I think you've mentioned it in various forms throughout the conversation, but just in your words, what would you say is the biggest, what excites you the most about that?
That's a great question. And I know everyone has a different opinion, and maybe had a different opinion, and now it's slowly changed as we adapt. I initially, when I saw it, found out about it, I was really excited and happy about it, because for me, with 10 years in the company, I was proud and happy about the old school logo and just culture, etc. But being 10 years in, I wasn't so attached to it. I
Yeah.
understand people that have been in the company 20, 30 years and how hard that could be on their ego and soul of like, what are we doing? For
Yeah.
someone like me that was 10 years in, I was like, I love this. This is so great, because I still have another 10, 20 years to go. So for me, the change meant new, refreshing. We've got huge opportunities to continue and change the industry. And it was a very bold move. And I really love that they took the risk to do that, because that was a
Mm-hmm.
big risk. I
Yeah.
mean, that was, I'm sure, a lot of hard decisions. And I think it was the right thing to do, because the energy landscape is changing. The talent that is coming in, they don't necessarily want to go work for an oil and gas service company. So it's how you position yourself as a technology leader and, energy company versus oil and gas. And we're still staying true to our core, which I really liked. It's not like we were
Yeah.
like, we are no longer oil and gas. It was like, we've got a core, which is oil and gas, but we've got all of these other exciting things that we're bringing. So for me, it was awesome. I'm very happy with it. And I think the new generation really likes it as well. And it gives them a more exciting future than if we would have kept the old brand.
For sure. I think you're 100% right there. And hopefully it, leans in on some of the things we talked about today. You mentioned we're on Instagram. Big. That's huge. We're appealing to a new generation in not just oil and gas, but science, technology, engineering. I mean, we are a technology company. We've been a technology company. And then just, our whole new identity is, as you said, bold. I mean, it's awesome. It's very exciting.
RP has a podcast. How cool is that? If you would have
Right.
told me that 5 years ago, I would have been like, there's no way that would ever happen. But
Yeah.
it's so refreshing to see that the company is adapting to the new generation and what employees like. I want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, Massiel, I appreciate you coming on. I know this was a short 30, 40-minute conversation. I'm sure we could go much longer. Hopefully we can have you back on. But one thing I like to do to end, as you know, is some rapid fire fun fact questions. Are you open for that?
Yes, let's go.
Cool. So what is your favorite food?
Pizza and pasta. Got it from
Oh,
both.
together or like on separate nights?
No, together at the same time.
Oh,
But
nice.
not
Okay.
like one plate of them, but like one slice of pizza and some pasta.
Okay, nice. In Wisconsin, where I went to school, they have a pizza with macaroni and cheese on top. It's pretty awesome. Um, if you go to Starbucks or a coffee shop, what's your coffee order?
Triple grande Americano with a little bit of milk and 2 stevias.
Oh, nice. Do you say triple Americano?
Yeah, grande triple Americano.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of caffeine. Would you rather have a beach vacation or a mountain retreat?
Mountain retreat.
Awesome. If you could meet any person, who would that be? Famous person, who would that
That
be?
could be anybody. I love Elon Musk. So
Yeah.
I wish I had like 1% of his brain.
Yeah, a few people have said they'd like to meet him. He'd definitely be an interesting person. In fact, one thing I just read about him is, he's really good at saying no to things, so he can focus on what he wants to accomplish. I definitely need to borrow some of that, but yeah, he'd be an interesting person to meet. And then last one, if you had a book recommendation or podcast, what would that be?
Okay, I'll do a book and a podcast. So How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie was life-changing for me. I recommend it to every single person because you're going to learn so much about yourself. And when I'm in conversations now, I catch myself through the book, and it's really changed my outlook and even how I handle myself. Podcasts, I love The Skinny Confidential. I recommend it. It's all about health and fitness, about how to eat for optimum, nutrition, health, anti-aging. Just they're phenomenal. They have over 600 episodes. It's a husband and wife, Lauren and Michael. Phenomenal podcast. They have doctors on, athletes on, entrepreneurs, and I just love hearing their stories about just how to make your life better, how to live a healthier life. Yeah,
that's a big one. That's something that we didn't even touch on this podcast, and maybe we'll have to have another one because you are so big into that, health and fitness realm. So yeah, definitely have to. Actually, you recommended that before, and I took a listen, so I'll have to put it back in my queue. Awesome. Well, Massiel, again, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing tips, your background, your history, how to navigate things, why you're so inspiring, why you like to inspire people. So I greatly appreciate you coming on, and thank you for the time today.
Thank you so much, Hunter, for the invitation. And I look forward to getting some feedback. I hope everybody enjoys this podcast.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Reservoir. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And please follow along for more episodes on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you.